You're listening to Wild Things and Wild Places, a Muley Fanatic Foundation podcast that aims to discuss issues and efforts related to the Muley Fanatic Foundation mission, the conservation of mule deer, furthering the sport of hunting, and sound wildlife management.
Everybody knows I'm a Muley Fanatic.
It's time for Wild Things and Wild Places. And here's your guide, Joshua Corsi.
All right, welcome to Wild Things and Wild Places, broadcasting from the Mile High Hunt and Fish Expo in Denver, Colorado, their first event to bring a sportsman show to the state of Colorado and the Denver area. Man, what first thoughts? I got Joey Fagel and Scott Hampel, who leads our Colorado effort. First thoughts on the Expo?
I think it's been fantastic. For the first year, first day on a Friday, I think the traffic's been pretty heavy. Had quite a few visitors in our booth alone, and some of the people I've talked to, they've really thought it's been pretty nice to see some of these vendors. It's a lot of gear, and especially with the fishing stuff involved with it. They thought it was pretty cool to actually not have a whole lot of outfitters here. It was a lot of merchandise type vendors. Yeah, I think it's tremendous.
Scott, specific to Colorado, the hunting culture itself is alive and well. But to be able to bring a show like this, it really showcases and promotes the hunting heritage and the industries that support it. This is a valuable asset to not only this area, but really the state, and even, I would say, those that have come from other places to really support something that's much needed.
I would agree. Over the years, there's always been a couple of these in the wintertime in downtown Denver. But the last few years, from what I understand, because I haven't really participated, but a lot of those shows have been on the decline. In fact, there's only one show remaining in Denver. So I'm glad to see that this show is here. And again, I haven't had a chance to walk around in here and look yet, but it just from being in here for a few minutes, it does look like this show is bigger than the last time I went to a show in downtown Denver.
Yeah, for their first event, I think they've knocked it out of the park, and it's something to grow on. Scott, I wanted to visit specifically with you because you have led the Muley Fanatic Foundation efforts for the state of Colorado, two essentially chapters that have merged into one, which probably logistically makes a little bit more sense for you. But the history of you and Muley Fanatic Foundation and Joey and I personally, we're approaching 20 years.
We are.
Think about that.
It's... in 2026 will be 20 years.
That's right.
Yep. I first met you guys in September of 2006. And we've been working on mule deer conservation since.
Yeah. When you think about that 20 years, Joey, almost 20 years, and you think about the path that started to what it has brought to fruition today with the Muley Fanatic Foundation as its own entity, it really all traces back to Scott driving with the Beagles, showing up to have a meeting where you and I said, we got to do something. Mule deer need some help.
Yeah.
And at the time, the only opportunity that we seen that was known on the landscape for mule deer conservation was the Mule Deer Foundation, which you were a regional director for.
Correct. I had, well, just to back up a little farther, I've been doing this type of work for 27 years, 27 consecutive years. I started as a volunteer with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation here in Denver, and then in 2000, the Mule Deer Foundation got started, and again, I helped to start that. I was one of the initial volunteers to get that started, and I worked just as a volunteer here in the Denver Mile High chapter up until 2005, through 2005. I lost my wife in a car accident, and I had an opportunity to make a career change, and a regional director position opened up, so I took it. At the time, it was probably much needed for me. It helped me, heal from losing my wife at that time. I went on. What I did is I buried myself with work, and in doing that, I got to meet a lot of great people throughout Colorado and Wyoming, and New Mexico and Nebraska and South Dakota. I mean, I was traveling all over the place. I was very passionate about helping mule deer, and I still am. I'm continuing to do it. But now I'm doing it purely as a volunteer capacity. And my life is so busy, honestly, we merged the Denver and Greeley chapters during COVID. COVID interrupted our fundraising efforts, But combining the chapters has been good for us. We put on one big event, and honestly, we're short on volunteers. So combining the events and having one large event, we're still drawing the same people who came to our events when we were separate. We always have the loyal supporters, and they're continuing to come. It took us a while to recover from COVID. But yeah, we're up and running again. We've had, since 2021, we've had events that have been a combined joint effort between the chapters. And again, all the volunteers know each other. They've known each other for years. They get along well. We get the work done. Honestly, we would probably like to do more. It's just that everyone's getting old and they're tired and, they're retiring. I was telling you earlier that we've had 4 or 5 volunteers who have passed away. So it's time for us to get busy and recruit some of the younger generation to keep this moving and keep it moving forward.
Yeah, carry that flag and champion the effort to the future. You're right. Scott, historically, your chapter and the efforts of just the Colorado efforts, if you will, significant strides of impact on the ground. And I think that's always been the measuring stick, as you know, when Joey and I, when you were still with MDF, and we had the very frank conversation about our frustrations if we were going to resign that affiliation and start and establish the foundation. That motivation to us was being able to have something you could quantify and measure as a tangible effort of action in the name of conservation for mule deer on the ground. And for a lot of folks, that just simply equates to putting dollars on the ground. And your chapter and your efforts in Colorado has been nothing short of significant. And with this event that you just had in February, at the end of the day, it's almost $750,000 that this effort has been able to put on the ground in Colorado. When you look back on that and you think about the Highway 9 project and some of these larger ticket items that have costed, millions of dollars, but your contribution has been there, I think the thing that's always impressed me is the transparency at your event, showcasing to the supporters where these dollars are being allocated, and to the multitude of those projects that entire allocations over more than a decade now encompasses. When you look back on that, how does that sit not only with you, but the volunteers? And then how do you think that continues to drum up support for people wanting to support this moving forward?
I'm often asked, where does the money go? I was asked that, I've been asked that for 27 years in doing this. So when we started this organization and when I brought it into Colorado, it was critical for me to be able to track all that information. And I still do it today when we're allocating money to projects. I have a spreadsheet that I track it in. I allocate the money, and then I send the people who are requesting the money a formal grant letter. And then when they're ready to bill us, they bill us. In fact, I got a bill today for a project that we committed to help a rancher put a conservation easement on his property. It was a 2-phase project, and we helped him do that. We're always looking for people who are organizations that are willing to partner with us. And so we've done a lot of projects. We've spread a lot of money throughout the state of Colorado. And as you mentioned, at our fundraising events, we always have literature there explaining exactly where the money has gone. And again, I really think people are interested in seeing that. I've had some people who have donated to us ask for that information, and again, I can provide it to them within minutes, and they're just shocked that someone is able to respond that quickly with that kind of detail, that level of information.
Yeah,
I think it's very beneficial.
There's a lot of great volunteers that have been involved with Muley Fanatic Foundation, and you're right. I think there is an expiration to the amount of time a volunteer can put forth. It's life, it's real. But you are the exception to the rule, and we've always joked that in our minds, and not only with your volunteer efforts with MFF or prior time with MDF or even prior time volunteering for MDF, if there was a image of what would be Scott Hampel, it is the freaking Energizer Bunny, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been accused of that a time or two.
When you had open heart surgery a few years ago, I remember Joey and I thinking, well, he wore it out.
Yeah.
He's so full of heart. He wore it out. Right. They had to help him. Yeah, it's been an amazing run of what you have given to the conservation community. And, and I'm mindful when we visit and we think about years past and you just have those moments of recollection of people that have been involved. Stan Luke, of course, was just someone that we all had very much a great amount of respect and admiration for. And as you get older, I think you just look back at the meaningful interactions and relationships. Furthering the mission has certainly been a key staple to these efforts, but the interaction of the people that this attracts and brings together, it's like nothing else.
Yeah, it really is. I have made some lifelong friends through these conservation efforts, putting on fundraising, just going out, meeting people. I have really met some fantastic people, and I have solid friendships, and I will for the rest of my life by just volunteering and meeting people, and I think a lot of volunteers would reciprocate those same comments towards me.
Yeah, the one thing that's unique about your event that you hold every year is the amount of support that you get from the oil and gas industry. Of course, out of that Greeley area, that part of this state, that activity is a staple to their viability as their local economy, and even the state depends on such activities. Have you run into being associated with conservation and yet still having such a faithful support base of folks within that industry that have tried to figure out how those connect and align in parallel for the same value goal of mule deer conservation, but yet also for their industry?
Well, I think, I've actually wondered about that. And then again, when you really look at the people who make up the oil field industry, most of those people are also active hunters, so they really care about the resource itself. And I think we've all seen political changes over the last 20 years. Our country's trying to move away from oil and gas, and it's unfortunate, but I think the oil and gas industry has taken a beating, and the employees have taken a beating, and it's really not deserved. Our country, our economy, we still need oil and gas. We're going to have it for years to come. In my opinion, we just can't move to wind and solar as fast as some people believe. So I think we're gonna have to continue to support these industries. And I know that, especially in Colorado, that and again, I get this information from working with the volunteers who work in that industry. In Colorado, some of the activities going on with oil and gas exploration is very tough. They've said it's some of the toughest regulations anywhere in the country. And right here between Denver and Cheyenne, there's a lot of oil production that's still going on. And again, through this past, since 2013, that's when we started our fundraising, we still get a significant portion. And I'm going to say that's probably 75% of the people that attend the banquets are somehow tied with the oil and gas industry. And again, they're very supportive, and not only to conservation, but they're very supportive to schools and other nonprofits. I've heard of stories of how some of the oil and gas companies go into some of the schools that don't have budget, and they provide things for the students, the children. They've made a big impact on some of the smaller communities between here and Cheyenne by contributing, funds to help, keep with activities outside of conservation.
Yeah, really a good community partner for sure as an industry. Joey, I know because your wife works in the oil and gas industry, we've had many conversations about the polarizing efforts of conservation and energy being at opposite ends of the spectrum. That's never been part of Muley Fanatic Foundation. I think that moniker is sometimes used because of some of the other groups that are involved, and some of the groups that are more litigating groups than actual boots on the ground, fence post, water guzzler, tangible conservation efforts that can be quantified and measured. But I'm curious, and this is a good opportunity for you, because we've never talked about this on a podcast, but with your wife working in oil and gas, and then some of the things that oil and gas hears about conservation, what are those conversations look like sometimes at the dinner table at home?
Well, there's a lot of arguments. But, it's supported our family for 20 years. And, there's no doubt that we need oil and gas. Oil produces so many products in this country. People aren't even aware of it. You know, there's certain areas where maybe oil and gas may not be or should not be there, but that's where we get the products. But the good thing about oil and gas is they're always, just like Scott says, they always are there to work together to do better things. Sure, and with the technology nowadays, they're trying to improve a lot on the drilling and stuff like that. So it's not like they don't care, because they try and make different new equipment, new things, new strategies to prevent what they've done in the past. Others just don't, like what Scott said, you know, wind and solar, that stuff, it's going to take up a lot of landscape, and it's going to be there forever when it's not working. Oil and gas is there. They do things the right way, and they give back, and they improve some of the habitat in some of the areas that they have affected. And my wife, she supports everything she does on the oil and gas side. She supports everything that I do on the conservation side. And it's good to have those arguments, because we learn a lot of things from each other. You know, I can give her the reasons why I could see some setbacks towards mule deer populations with the oil and gas industry, and then she could tell me the things that are very important to her in the oil and gas industry. It's just been great with that combination and everything and that, and especially when she's never been a hunter and she's never gotten involved until she met me, and now she sees a lot of things, and she's able to share those things with her co-workers. The same thing here. I'm able to share it with our supporters and stuff like that. I think it's been a great thing, but definitely I agree totally with Scott. The oil and gas industry is just getting hit in the head just like the mule deer are. I really hope that can improve, and I hope we could get back into where we were back in the mid-2000s when that industry was very strong and we had everything then.
Yeah, on that note of wind and solar, Scott, Joey, you know this because we visit on this on a daily basis, but looking forward and what the landscape changes that are coming look like, and some of this is certainly agenda-driven, there's no doubt. I think we know that. But solar scares the death out of me. And not because I don't believe that there is a place for green energy, but when you look at public lands particularly, and the charge of the BLM is to manage public lands for multiple use. That is the charge. And you take a solar sea, if you will, 10,000 acres, and you fill that with solar fields, you fence that off. It's hard for me to imagine a way that can be propped up or presented as something that is multiple use. There's no other benefit. There's not a grazing benefit. There certainly is no wildlife resource benefit to that. To me, that is a very singular use. And when I see that on public lands, knowing how important public lands and wide open spaces are for sustainable and thrivable mule deer populations, that really just gives me the shivers, because we're losing that landscape at a high rate of speed. 22 million acres of public lands are anticipated to have solar seas on them over the next decade. And to me, that's very troubling. It's very alarming. That's a loss of habitat, which ultimately, that fragmented habitat results in a loss of wildlife resources. And the other part about that is how many people do you know within those industries? How many people can you put a face to that work in those industries in your community? It's not like the oil and gas industry. It's not someone who's friend of your son or daughter on their Little League team, you know them, or you go to church with somebody from that industry. It comes in, the construction is done, it's fenced off, Constantine wire put across the top, keep out, and it's gone. And I know there is a place for green energy. I would be fully supportive of seeing solar added to existing structures that have already had that footprint. But when you start talking about these uninhabited landscapes that are now being modified, changed, and ultimately completely managed and utilized for a different purpose, it's all at the demise of our wildlife resource.
Yeah, I completely agree, Josh. There's certainly a place for green energy, and I think we, as a country, as a world, we need to move there. But I think there's an entirely new set of problems that are going to happen that people aren't thinking about right now. You destroy however many acres you said it was if we're destroying 20,000 acres of sage habitat to put in, solar panels and solar farms, yeah, that's going to have a big impact on wildlife species. It's going to have a big impact on plant species. There's just a whole can of worms that are going to be opened that we really don't know or understand yet. The same thing with wind turbines. Again, there's a need for this. I have been contacted numerous times about how birds are being killed. Would we sign on to something to stop such aggressive, installation of the windmills? I don't have answers. I don't have solutions. But yeah, I just know there are more issues that are going to come that we just don't really know or understand yet.
Yeah, when you look at the plan to move in that direction across the West, 10,000 acres here, 15,000 acres here, 5,000 acres here, it may not seem, okay, that's all of an area. But when you collectively combine that and you look at 22 million acres for green energy in the name of solar and wind, that's an alarming amount of habitat. To me, I think everyday Joe citizen recognizes that, yes, there probably is a need for a balance. But what is at the expense or the consequence of that balance? And is it moving too fast? And I think that's where a lot of the concern comes, is it seems like the pace and the growth of some of these placements, some of these modifications to planning and zoning amendments at county levels or municipal levels, it's like it's at a very high rate of speed and how fast we're adjusting to it. And I think it does cause some concern for the challenges that maybe aren't known today, but then are having to be dealt with tomorrow. And I think all of us within the conservation community, we recognize that, the one thing we know that works is wide open spaces.
Yes.
And that's certainly a concern. Scott, I would like to shift and talk just briefly here. You, as a resident of Colorado, someone who's lived here a very much large portion of your adult life, you're seeing some changes within your state that seem like an assault on the hunting heritage or the badge of honor that a sportsman or sportswoman would wear. And I would have to think that same change or that same effort or even assault, as I said, and I don't think that's too far of a stretch to actually call it that. We visited with Dan Gates, who you had at your event. He expressed some of the specific issues. But I think it probably is also reflective of what used to be a very wide open north and south I-25 corridor from the southern Wyoming border to the metropolitan area of Denver. The growth of population, that landscape now encompasses 6 million? Is it?
Yes. One of the things that's happening in Colorado, we've had tremendous population growth. I first came to Colorado in 1984, so it's 40 years. And in that 40 years of time, I believe our population in this state went from 3 million, and we're up to 6 million people now. And yes, the I-70 and I-25 corridors through the state is where most of the population growth is. And with that, there's been a huge increase of population here that have come from other states. And unfortunately, people come and they bring their ideas and their politics to Colorado, and Colorado has definitely changed. Again, it's had an impact on that population growth, had an impact on wildlife migration, wildlife habitat,
Wildlife management.
And again, there continues to be efforts, in my opinion, that are designed to have an impact on hunting, a negative impact on hunting. If you're an average person, I guess the studies show that most people really don't have an opinion about hunting. Most people are accepting of hunting, but there's a large number of people in this state who just don't want to see hunting anymore. They don't see the value in it. They don't see the value in a North American hunting model. I don't think the people, in fact, I have friends who have found out that I'm very active in the conservation world, and I've had to sit down and explain to them literally where the money's coming from. When you buy a hunting and fishing license, that money is what is used to run Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Your average citizen just does not understand that. They think they're paying income taxes and it's running Colorado Parks and Wildlife. It is not. The majority of the money that runs that agency comes from people who buy the hunting and fishing licenses. But yet, there are other people, other ideas of how that money should be used. That money should be used to maintain, in my mind, wildlife populations, hunting and maintain hunting and fishing. It's critical that we have those dollars available to help the species, to continue to promote hunting and fishing. But I think you're seeing a lot of the opposite of that right now.
Scott, when was it that the Colorado State Parks and Division of Wildlife became one entity?
Is
that 10 years, 12 years ago?
About 2011 or 12 was when that happened.
Yeah.
Colorado Parks was a different organization, and then we had Division of Wildlife. Well, now those two entities have merged, and, Colorado Division of Wildlife.
I'm assuming that they were adamantly opposed to that.
Yeah.
When the idea first started to be talked about, and then to actually see it come to fruition. Yeah. I'm sure that anybody who cares about wildlife just thought merging these two entities together, two state agencies, into one, recognizing that they both have a very different mission and charge, is ultimately going to be something that wildlife will come up on the short end of.
I completely agree with you. Because of that merger, and again, I don't have all the statistics, but I'm sure they're available. The majority of the funding for the agency comes from people who hunt and fish. Colorado Parks, obviously, there's a part of the revenue comes from the people who use the state parks. They have entrance fees and, year-long annual passes to enter the parks. But that amount of revenue compared to the hunting and fishing licenses is significantly smaller. I agree.
You start taking money away from wildlife to start doing trail maintenance or expanded mountain biking trails, et cetera, et cetera. The list just goes on and on. Ultimately, you're taking money out of one coffer that was generated for something specific, wildlife.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's happening, but again, it's in Colorado, much like Wyoming, there's huge areas of federal land. So I'm not exactly sure how all the budgeting for all that works. But you do have to remember that, in Colorado, the game wardens, essentially, again, they're having to deal with issues that they didn't have to deal with, 30, 40 years ago, because there's more and more people out on the public lands. There's more and more situations where wildlife, bears are invading people's homes or vehicles. So you have all these, I call them wildlife nuisance situations that happen. It takes the resources from Colorado Parks and Wildlife to deal with that.
There has been a decay within our heritage as hunters, in an effort to lessen that, an effort to not prioritize it where its place in our existence, where we have come from as hunters and gatherers, as a species. It just seems like our heritage, if we don't step up and be good stewards of that and be accountable and make it profound that it is an existence because there are people that care, that we're at risk of losing it. And I don't know what your take on that is. I don't know how many people outside of your efforts with conservation you feel are involved in that hunting community. But it seems like just 30,000-foot view, it's slowly just being lost.
I agree with that. I think hunters and fishermen have to really step up, get the message out. I think a lot of it is educating the people who don't hunt and fish. They need to understand, well, first of all, they need to understand that it's regulated. They need to understand that it's all very controlled. If the mule deer population is declining in areas, well, there are steps that can be taken to prevent that from happening. They reduce the number of licenses.
Specific target treatments
the target treatments to keep the harvest levels down lower.
I think as hunters, we definitely have a big battle, and we have to stay up on things.
Because there's a whole nother arena. You can be involved in landscape projects at the soil level, to the water level, to the fence level, to the wildlife crossing level. There are multiple layers of physical projects that you can be engaged to. Then you take the realm of research, learning and understanding, applying that knowledge to help state wildlife agencies make better informed decisions, help fund those projects. But then there is a separate arena that you better darn well be front and center and present in, and that's the policy arena.
Absolutely.
And those efforts over here can quickly be negated by what happens in that arena. And that's a troubling thing to think about. When you really support conservation, you tend to gravitate towards the boots on the ground projects or support of the research or support of the habitat treatments. But that other arena, boy, the stakes are high there if you're not engaged and involved.
Yeah, absolutely. If the hunters are completely removed, where is all this funding going to come from when we need that habitat enhancement stuff? It's not going to come from the states. It's not going to get from the taxes and stuff, because like Scott said, there's people out there now that are trying to push these funds towards things that aren't even going to benefit the species where the support comes from.
Yeah.
So you totally eliminate hunters, all that funding is going to be completely eliminated. The populations are going to go unhealthy. There's nothing you're going to be able to do about it because you will not have any money. Look around us right now. All these people are pulling dollars out of their wallet because they know it's going to benefit all these species, all this wildlife that we're discussing today. And once these people are gone, there won't be any wildlife. Photographers won't be able to photo anything. We won't be able to supply our families with food, because that's the important thing about hunting as well, is that's where a lot of families are supported for food sources, is from their hunting.
Yeah, I think the takeaway here is that there is a huge responsibility that when you identify as a sportsman or sportswoman, it has got to be beyond your take of the resource or your love of pursuit of the resource. You better darn well recognize that you're going to have to do more. And I think each of us have to be accountable to know that we got to do a little bit more as a community, as sportsmen and sportswomen. No matter what affiliation you are in whatever alphabet letter of support, REMF, MDF, MF, TU, and the list goes on and on. There are a ton of great groups out there. Certainly engagement and membership is one thing, but I think that the next step is where, as a community, we need to be able to unite ourselves even stronger and really become a voice that really is something to be taken into consideration in that decision-making arena or policy arena. And when that known model of presence exists in that arena, those folks will think twice before making decisions that impact the things that we're doing.
I agree. And in Colorado, you mentioned Dan Gates. It was about a year and a half ago. There's been a very legitimate, strong effort to unite all the conservation groups and the hunting and angling communities. We have Colorado Wildlife Conservation Project is an organization that started, and Muley Fanatic Foundation is a member of that. But there's approximately 30 different organizations in the state of Colorado that are a member of that now. And we are working to get a voice in the policy arena because, yeah, there are decisions that are made in our legislature and our governor office that impact wildlife that the hunting and angling communities just have not been a part of. And if the hunters and fishermen don't stay engaged, yeah, we're at risk of losing more and more of our ability to enjoy the passion that we have.
I don't know what your thoughts, and Joey, you and I have talked about this. The issues that seem to be presented, regardless of state that you are from or you reside within, we all have an opportunity, which I believe to be one of the greatest blessings of freedom that is exercised in an action item, and that is the ability to vote. And it is hard to stay on top of all of the various issues that our elected constituent or representatives of our constituents deal with, from taxes to education and the list is long. And you look at what our legislative bodies and their responsibilities are charged with, it's hard to be engaged to all those issues knowing that your representative or your senator is representing you and how you feel. And that can really come down, though, to a couple of core issues that I think each of us hold as hunters. and that is to know where they stand with wildlife issues. Other issues that maybe cross different lines of where you are as a Christian man, maybe those become other issues of priority for you to know where does that he or she cast a vote that represents how I believe, because ultimately that's what you have put them in a position to do, is hopefully reflect your voice or your thoughts or your ideals or beliefs. But when it comes to hunting and wildlife, maybe there should be something that could be a scorecard, something like the NRA has done with the Second Amendment for years, for you to know on these issues, this is where this candidate aligns. And maybe that's a way that the everyday sportsman that can't be involved intimately in the policy arena can at least know here is some efforts at what'd you call it, CWP?
Colorado Wildlife Conservation Project,
Okay.
CWCP.
CWCP. Maybe that's something that CWCP could look to organize at the state level for the state of Colorado is here is a grading scale or a membership of CWCP that says here's our independent results of these candidates and the efforts that we have reached out to engage these folks that are running for these offices to ultimately be your voice. And here's where they stand where it comes to hunting and wildlife. And I don't know, that maybe that's too simplistic. Usually complex problems don't require simple solutions. But it just seems to me like when you talk to everyday people who cast a vote, you get bombarded with social media advertisements, you get bombarded with mailings at your house. But how many of those issues, from education to abortion to taxes, how many of those really just move the needle for you? But there could certainly be some benefit if you knew where someone stood when it came to being related to wildlife and hunting.
Yeah, well, I know as a sportsman in this state, and again, through my involvement with all the other organizations and being part of CWCP, we are truly making efforts to make a presence more often, more frequently at Colorado Wildlife Commission meetings, the legislature. Later this month, we have a Sportsman's Day down at the Capitol building here in Denver. And again, it's all run by people of this coalition that we've built. Again, we're really making an effort to get more engaged in the policy arena, but it's got to come from your average hunter. It can't just come from, people like me who are actively involved in conservation. It's got to really start happening at the grassroots level. You really got to get your average hunter to start getting engaged and realizing, some of these policies that are happening, they're not going to be able to hunt if they don't start getting more involved and making a voice and understanding the issues that are at hand. I think we really need to start educating the general public about all the issues with wildlife. Again, there's such a lack of education.
So let me throw this out there to you because this is new. Well, Joey and I haven't talked about this before, but moving forward to the 2025 Colorado chapter banquet, how much significance or emphasis do you feel as the guy leading the Muley Fanatic Foundation Colorado efforts can be put on helping use your affiliation and your Muley Fanatic Foundation involvement to help educate the people in the room that are supporting your event that these are issues that have happened since you were here last year, or these are potential issues that may have been started but are coming up? Because it's one thing to tell people where your money is going on the Safe Highway 9 crossing. People can wrap their head around that's a good idea. That you're a good steward of my dollars to invest in something like that. But how do we as an organization, and you being a part of it, how do we step up our game too?
First of all, I think hunters and anglers need to become more aware of the policy arena and be able to discuss those topics that are coming up. Because, like I said, your average sports person just is unaware of a lot of these things that are happening. They don't realize that they're discontinuing, let's say, coyote hunting. Well, if you don't stay engaged,
and that just happened.
Right?
Look at Michigan.
That just happened in the state of Michigan.
They stopped it for 4 months out of the year because they thought that coyote pups were going to be left abandoned.
Yeah, correct.
In dens.
Correct.
So for 4 months out of the year, they have banned coyote hunting, and that's in Michigan. I mean, to me, there's issues that are happening all over. And maybe you don't need to look within your own state at the only issues that you know of within your own state. But when you start hearing all of these other things that are associated one way or another to the hunting heritage, to be able to collect and compile that information, to just showcase and broadcast, these are the things that are death by 1,000 cuts.
These are things that are going on in other states. They can go on here.
Yeah, and you know, I will tell you, Joey, you and I we've had this conversation intimately, because as a 501c3, you walk a fine line when it comes to lobbying or not lobbying. But I think this can be done in a way where this isn't lobbying or not lobbying. Part of our mission statement is sound wildlife management. And that is rooted in the North American model of wildlife conservation. And when you vary from what is considered sound wildlife management because of public pressure or public opinion, it should be called out. If not, we're not true to our own mission.
Will they listen to just one of us saying that, or will they need to see all 5,000 members and to express their feelings? And I think that's really what they need to do. But you need to still go into there with an education of what's going on. You need to really know, and you need to politely express your thoughts and your opinions and what you're against. And I think more people need to be involved in those type of things. We've seen it at commission meetings. We've seen it just anywhere. Legislation, we've seen it all over. There's just people that don't attend those things, and they really need to. Some people don't even know we have game commissioners. It's amazing that a hunter would not know that. The ones that lead and make the decisions of our wildlife and our hunting. That's what people really need to do. And yes, you can only educate the people if they come. And that's why we always encourage them, just come, you need to. And I know sometimes listening to those things can maybe get a little boring, but man, there's some stuff coming up.
There is some significant stuff in the future.
Yeah, everything. And, people, we can go back to the wind turbines. Those are getting placed on public land. You can fight for that stuff because that's public land. But when it comes to private lands, yes, we really can't do much. It's private lands, or landowners.
Private property rights are sacred.
Yeah, they can do what they want to do.
Yeah.
But when you have the opportunity to fight for the public land side, you need to do it, because that's just going to add on to what comes on to the private land. So then now you're really screwed. You lost it all. It's just important for people to get educated and be aware of what is happening on the other side.
And I think the other part of that is it's important to also know that as much as you try to formulate a strategy or a plan to up your game or to be involved in those efforts or those arenas that maybe we haven't put enough attention to, is that there are other folks that are on the opposite end of that are very organized and very strategized. And I bring that to point because, I don't know, I think we've talked about it, but maybe a lot of folks haven't realized this, but when you look at the state of Nevada and their wildlife commission that is also appointed by the governor, and the recent push to change that commission to reflect non-hunters as a voice on that commission, with the study showing that hunters make up less than 4% of Nevada's population. And so the non-hunters are utilizing that as a tool, having that information to demand that this governor-appointed body reflect the populace of the state, which would include a presence of non-hunters on a commission that is charged with the management of our wildlife. Them being the non-hunters putting forth that we care about wildlife too. We like to take pictures of them. We like to see them. It enhances our landscape. But we're not hunters. But our voice is just as important as those that are. And that body of men or women should also be inclusive of us as non-hunters. And that is a game changer. When you start seeing that shift of dynamics to now having wildlife commissions potentially have a very dominant position as non-hunters, the only one that's really going to be in the crosshairs at the end of the day on that will be the hunters. Mm-hmm. Because it will shift management applications, management prescriptions, and the use of hunting as a tool in the conservation toolbox. And so when you think about that, man, that should keep you awake at night.
Yeah.
And that ain't that far from us, Nevada. But look at that. You look at the population in Nevada. It's very similar to Colorado in some regards. That bulk of people is in
Las Vegas, right?
what happens in Colorado, those decisions that are being made in that arena, it's not the guy who lives in Durango, Colorado, or Rifle, Colorado, or Macon, Colorado.
It's the I-25 corridor.
It's the I-25 corridor. It's those heavy urban areas that are being able to have that type of influence. Yeah, we're not going to solve all the problems today, gents. We're just going to talk about it. But I do think it's important that we start having a little bit more of these discussions, because it's been very evident from the people that have come by the booth today that if you were a hunter and you live in Colorado, you were starting to feel the crunch. You were starting to feel the push against you and something you value as a hunter, and that is your time in the field, because there is a concentrated effort working against that. Yeah. And you're living in it, Scott.
Yeah. Well said, Josh. That is, I think, very true.
Well, Scott, you know what Joey and I have always thought about you, not just as someone who's involved in conservation, but truly someone who has been a very valued friend to us. You mentioned it before, lifelong friendships. There's no doubt that this is a lifelong friendship, and I hope there's many years of us being able to talk and share about just our love of hunting, our love of mule deer. You do an incredible job here. You're second to none. There's no doubt about that. You carry a big load. Your biggest fault, if there is one, is probably
too big a load.
Yeah, it is. You're just, yep, I'll do that. Yep, I'll do that. Yep, and I know that's just your personality, because you want to make sure it gets done to the standard that you have, which is extremely high, and we've always admired that about you. There's not an ask too big that you're not willing to meet. You're a unique individual in that regard. And as an Eagle Scout, I know you still to this very day at how old now? 50?
I'm 59.
59.
I'll be 60 later this summer.
Those 14 points of the Scout Law, you are the epitome of that Eagle Scout in my mind at every level. Even as a boyhood program, I think you are still such an ambassador for the things that program has instilled in you, and I'm just very proud to be associated with you in your efforts.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to retiring in a couple years.
Oh, don't say that.
And I'm, well,
no, we want that for you.
I don't know what I'm going to do, but I may try to do a little more. You know, I'll actually have a little more time, I hope, to do some of the things I'm talking about, like going to commission meetings and going to the legislature. And my time is very valuable. I just don't have a lot to share. I have a full plate all the time, but apparently I like it because I keep it full.
Well, you know the old adage, if you want something done, ask a busy person.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're organized to the point where they still get stuff done.
Absolutely.
It's just compartmentalizing, prioritizing, and making it happen. Joey, parting shot?
If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't even know anything about how conservation works and everything else. And this guy, is he like our godfather? I don't know. It's just amazing, and I keep thinking back at the very beginning. I reached out to him for mule deer conservation. Then you reached out to him for mule deer conservation. He's, hey, I have two guys that maybe I should just get them together. And he got us together, and look where we're at right now.
Yeah,
we're still together.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and it was just the genuine concern that something needs to be done, that we're on the timeline of history right now that's saying, hey, this is your responsibility. Step up.
So did you guys know each other back then?
Yeah, we went to high school together.
Okay.
Yeah, but not at the level of where we obviously are at today. Just to know that when you called me back and said, well, Joey Fagel reached out to me. Do you know Joey? I said, I know Joey. And then you to tell Joey, hey, Josh Corsi reached out to me. Do you know Josh? And then for us to meet, and then now look, 18 years later that we're sitting here at the Mile High Hunt Fish Expo, surrounded by all of this, talking about mule deer. And then you look back at all the efforts and strides of progress that have been made to be able to further that. It's
a lot has happened. A lot of good things have happened since then.
Yeah.
A lot of money raised, too.
And to know that you're the impetus to it, how does that make you feel, Godfather?
Godfather. Well, thank you for everything, Scott. I really appreciate it all from start to present. Thank you so much. Friendship means a lot.
Again, I appreciate it as well. I just need to find time and make it back to Rock Springs. I don't think I've been up there since 2013.
And you tried last year for Mule Deer Days.
Yeah.
And, we planned it when the whole state would be shut down by Mother Nature's.
Yeah. Right. I made it to Rollins, Wyoming, and had to spend the night in a hotel. Then had an opportunity to turn around and come back home the next morning. So I was with a friend, and we did. We got back home, and then they shut the freeway down again.
That had significant impact. So, hence the reason why Mule Deer Days this year, May 2nd through the 4th.
Yeah.
Don't plan an event in March. Even doing the chapter banquets. How many chapter banquets over the years has it been snowing to beat the band when the doors open?
Yeah, quite a few.
Scott Hampel, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Good to see you guys again.
Yeah.
Same.
All right. Scott Hampel, leading the Colorado chapter and all efforts in Colorado, for that matter, for the Muley Fanatic Foundation. Please reach out to Scott directly. We'll be sure to include his phone number and email in the write-up for this podcast when it makes its debut. But you will be a better individual for just having time to visit with Scott. You'll take away immediately his genuine regard for mule deer, his concern for mule deer, and his overall responsible stewardship accountability of himself as an individual just to conservation. If you live in Colorado and you want to help further these efforts, I think you probably picked up on the fact that Scott could use a little bit of help. Colorado's a big square state, and his presence here in the front range of the I-25 corridor, it's making its impact. But there are other places in Colorado as well, and Scott would be happy to help visit with you, help bring some of those ideas to action, and to get your efforts going in other parts of this beautiful state. Scott Hampel, Wild Things and Wild Places. Till next time, happy trails.
And that wraps up another episode of Wild Things and Wild Places. But remember, the journey doesn't end here. Make sure you never miss out by subscribing. Whether you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, streaming us on our website, or following us on social media, subscribing is the best way to stay connected. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more wild episodes.
Everybody knows I'm a Muley fanatic.